Joan Emmeline had been living alone in the forests of Connecticut for almost 3 years now, but soon she would be having a baby. Her daily chores were becoming more difficult as she was 9 months pregnant now and ready to deliver any day. She had named the baby Hannah. She knew she was having a girl. She had spent the early months of pregnancy willing it to be, influencing the growth of life inside her. Joan had expanded her cabin, adding another room in preparation for Hannah's soonly anticipated arrival. She was kneeling in her garden, singing softly to both her belly and the growing plants. The rustling of leaves and snapping of a few twigs caught her attention. She looked up to see Longleaf, Gentlefern, and Acorn looking at her like she was a ghost. Joan knew they were no threat. They looked weak, hungry, and docile. So she smiled a comforting smile to them, standing to her feet with a few stumbles of effort from the weight imbalance. She greeted them. "Hello, English?" The three natives' confusion deepened. This strange woman was speaking gibberish to them. Longleaf took a step forward. His own analysis of her was also similar. He saw no threat. However, his eyes darted around, expecting or worried any minute of the father or husband coming out. He asked her in Chikoi who she was. Joan's face stayed smiling. "Oh, no English?" She mimed eating motions. "Hungry? Eat?" Gentlefern and Acorn stayed behind Longleaf, only peeking over his shoulders. Longleaf took another step forward, and so did Joan, closing their gap. Joan had seen other native tribes come to Whitby to trade, but the Chikoi were isolated and far from the coast where the new colonies were popping up. The three of them studied her. Almost everything about her was foreign to them. Joan walked towards her cottage, waving them to follow. The three approached, but did not step inside. That was okay, though. Joan brought out her box of smoked fish fillets directly to them and placed it down. Joan passed out the fish one by one. "Here, eat. It's okay." She could sense their doubts, so she grabbed a fish herself and gave it a bite and a chew. "See? Safe. It's okay." Longleaf took the first bite. Acorn and Gentlefern waited. After waiting a few moments and trusting the food was safe, he told his wives to eat as well. Acorn was the first to thank Joan. Although Joan had no idea what she was saying, she was still able to appreciate the gratitude in the tones and inflections of Acorn's words. Longleaf, after some time eating and gaining a little bit of trust that there was no threat, he collected the leather-skinned canteens he and his wives had and stepped to the creek, dunking them into the water to fill them up. He looked over his shoulder to see Gentlefern and Acorn had both scooted over to Joan and had their hands on her belly to feel Hannah kicking around. Longleaf returned to them and handed his two wives their canteens. Joan looked between the three of them as they started talking amongst themselves. Acorn and Gentlefern were talking about Joan's blonde hair. "Her hair is so pretty," Acorn said admiringly. Gentlefern joined in. "Her skin is like the clouds." "Longleaf, who is she?" Longleaf took a few moments to consider. "I do not know everything of this place, but it is strange. Her home is made of logs, and the plants here grow in rows. She carries a child inside, but no sign of a husband or a man." Joan listened, fascinated with the strange language. Gentlefern, with her hand still feeling the kicks. "Maybe we should stay and see if we can help her if she is on her own. Repay her for her kindness. Maybe we can help deliver the baby, if she truly is alone." Acorn seemed to like that idea. After all, Joan did seem harmless, and after their week of traveling and fighting to survive, a place of resources like this did make sense. Longleaf needed to consider all the risks. He had to be sure his wives were safe here. "We will see what help she needs, regain our strength, but we cannot stay. We do not know enough about her." Gentlefern and Acorn nodded, accepting their husband's decision. The three women mimed and tried their best to have a conversation. Although unknown to them, their dialogues were of two completely different subjects. Longleaf took the chance as they talked to go inspect the cabin. He was impressed with the idea of stacking logs and ran his finger along the clay sealant between them. He peeked inside and saw Joan's table covered in mushrooms. The stones inside for the fireplace. Everything was fascinating about this home. As he was stepping inside, this is when Joan noticed Longleaf snooping around. She went and followed him inside. He was looking at the woodwork especially. Seeing trees cut and smoothed was so strange and mysterious to him. Joan was especially excited when his curiosity was drawn to the mushrooms and the paste they were being mashed into. "Mushrooms," Joan said, holding it to his eye level. Mushroom, Longleaf repeated. Placing the mushroom back to the table and looking down is when she noticed Longleaf's wrapped feet stained with blood. She looked to the two women who were still idle by the door. They also were suffering from awful blistering and early frostbite. Joan took Longleaf's hand and guided him to the bed. Sit, my goodness. She had to sit and pat the dried grass mattress a few times to convince him. She started digging through a pile of paste wrapped in leaves that were used as jars. The sweet bay magnolia leaves had the paste she wanted. She unwrapped it and then carefully peeled his foot wraps off with his leg resting on her knee. Longleaf watched her carefully. He had great concern still, but Joan's smile was genuine, and she was so eager to finally show someone her discoveries and magic-infused creations. Her movements were slow and gentle. Joan could tell the man was skittish. As his foot became exposed, she could see the damage was like an odometer for the great distances he must have traveled. She gave a sympathetic sigh and applied the paste to his sores, cuts, and blisters. Longleaf's face relaxed, and then he looked to Joan. His face of bewilderment made her chuckle. The paste was numbing the aches and pains and attacking the infections. He could feel the pain dissipate rapidly. Grabbing his other foot, she did the same there, too. He tried to stand to test his feet, but he wobbled. The numbing feeling made it hard to balance. Joan ushered him back down to bed. It's okay, just relax. Gentle Fern asked, What did she do? Longleaf, as he looked to his feet, She helped. I feel almost no pain. Her medicines are as strange as her. Joan pointed to the two women's feet. Help? He pointed to his own feet and repeated the word, Help? She nodded. Yes, help? Longleaf pointed to his wife's feet. Help. Joan brought Gentle Fern and Acorn to the bed next to Longleaf and treated them as well. The three of them could not stand, so Joan, in a very motherly fashion, tucked them all into her bed and set up their water and some veggies on the side table, and got the fireplace started. Longleaf froze in place as the fire and the bundle of sticks simply ignited when Joan looked at them. A technology he didn't understand? Was his exhaustion playing tricks on his mind? He didn't know, so he laid back down. Joan left them alone and stepped outside. Longleaf talked amongst his wives. They debated the strange medicine. Joan returned rather quickly. She was hauling in a basket of fish that were all still flopping around. Longleaf sat up, another mystery to solve added to his list. He saw no spears, nets, no hooks and rods. She was only gone 6 or 7 minutes tops. And then Joan started staging the fish to clean and descale. Longleaf tested his feet. He was wobbly, but could still stand, and walked over to Joan and stood next to her, willing to help the generous host. He searched for knives or tools, and to his puzzlement, she didn't seem to have any of those either. Longleaf slipped a finger into the mouth of a fish, ready to do the cleaning by hand. But Joan stopped him. No, watch. She stood at the table, and Longleaf almost fell over in his gasp as one of the fishes levitated from the table, and Joan disassembled it with her mind. She was so proficient that even the blood collected in midair into a sphere as the fish's skin was peeled and the little needle-like bones protruded out. Soon 2 perfect and clean fillets laid on the table, while the inside, skin, scales, and blood floated out the door and shot far into the forest. Longleaf had forgotten to breathe. Joan's smile was not much comfort to him, and his wives were also watching, stunned in shock. Longleaf stumbled back to the bed, and Acorn and Gentle Fern covered behind him. It's fine, it's okay, Joan said softly to comfort them. She was hoping that this time showing her abilities would spark fascination, and not fear and hatred like it did last time. Gentle Fern broke the silence first, and Joan watched as the three of them talked in their language that was unknown to her. However, it was Acorn who was the first to slide to the floor and take a knee, squeaking out the word, Chana? Joan did not know what this word was. She repeated it. Chana? Gentle Fern joined Acorn on bended knee, also saying Chana. And finally Longleaf reached for a fish and handed it to Joan. It floated from his hand, and once again Joan dismembered the fish in midair, as she did the first one. Longleaf, while watching her do it again, took to a knee. Chana, he said. Joan was thinking Chana meant the word again. What she would come to realize later is Chana was the name of the Chikoi goddess of the wilds and forest. Joan looked at the three of them and she felt validated and accepted. But more than anything, she felt her ego flare. The clean fillets hovered to the fire and spun like a rotisserie in the fireplace. Now sizzling and juicy, Joan flew them over to the still kneeling natives. They each grabbed the fillet that was floating in front of them and took a bite. It was perfect. No bones, and so much more succulent than the smoked fishes. Night had come, and Joan slept in Hannah's room while Longleaf, Gentlefern, and Acorn slept in the main room of the cabin. They did not sleep much that night. They whispered in the darkness, debates on what they witnessed. That night they all decided this was their new home, living with Joan, with Chana, if she would have them. In the weeks following, Gentlefern and Acorn helped Joan with the homestead by cleaning and watering the gardens. Longleaf had created a new bow and was bringing in hunts of beavers and foxes. He was bringing them to camp and letting Joan clean them in the air. It was so much more proficient and faster than with his sharpened stone knife. They had also started constructing a new cabin, just for Longleaf and his wives. Words of both languages were already being learned, too. Common words like eat, hello, sleep. Some were spoken in Chicoy and some in English. Having the natives around was a great help for Joan. It had been so hard for her to get around and keep up with the common chores with her pregnancy. Everyone was learning a lot from each other. Joan was teaching them agricultures and Western farming practices and cabin constructing. They were teaching Joan how to improve her leathers, the best types of grass to use for weaving. They made her a much better bed by wrapping pelts around the dried straw and grass and forming a warm, comfy beaver pelt mattress. Joan loved it and was very grateful. Even with the language barrier, everyone was happy and got along. Even Joan had found comfort having company with her, a comfort she had not felt since her parents and siblings passed all those years ago, sending her into an isolated life back at Whitby. Joan was at the garden influencing the plants. Gentlefern and Acorn sat one on each side of her. They loved watching the plants and vegetables grow in front of their eyes, like a modern-day time-lapse. Joan still could not grow from seed to full vegetables in a single day yet, though. She was helped to her feet by Gentlefern and Acorn. And suddenly, the tree near Joan popped and splintered. Sharp and ear-aching pops and whizzes rattled the three women's ears. Acorn fell to the ground, curled up, and screamed. Gentlefern had to balance between pulling Joan away and trying to get Acorn to snap out of her panic attack at the sudden and strange events. Voices from the forest called out, "Fire!" Another volley of terrifying cracks and whizzes surrounded them again. Joan looked to where the voices were coming from. In the tree line were 4 familiar faces, Whitby residents. One of them even a regular customer at her market stall, but now was part of a search party for her. They had spent all year looking for her. The pastor must have told the town of her return. The 4 men were almost done reloading their muskets, their rods packing the balls tight to the powder inside. Joan walked towards them, Gentlefern screaming in Chicoy for Joan to come back. Longleaf was returning from a hunt and was now at full sprint back to the homestead when he heard the commotion, his bow at the ready. The hammers of the muskets clicked back, and as the men shouldered them to aim, a phantom force ripped the muskets from their hands and spun them around. All 4 were looking down the barrels of their own musket. Longleaf arrived and stood between the threat and his wives, watching as the strange weapons hovered. Joan waddled forward, a fire in her heart. These men didn't understand the beauty of her gifts, and they almost killed the ones that did. They all turned to run. Joan felt the triggers with her mind, and as the metal clicked down and the clouds of burnt gunpowder enveloped the 4 men, no running footsteps were heard, and after the thunderous clap, only 4 thuds to the forest floor. "We are okay. I have Acorn. Go check Chana," Gentlefern said to Longleaf as she kneeled with Acorn, who was still in shock and curled up. He ran to Joan, who stood still, coldly staring at the 4 bodies of her former neighbors. Longleaf was looking her over and asking in English, "Hurt? Hurt?" She was unharmed, but still staring. Joan responded in Chicoy, "No," but she spoke too soon, because when it rains, it pours. A sudden and deep aching pain in her belly. So sudden and strong, she was almost brought to her knees, and she would have fallen if Longleaf had not caught her. He called over to his wives, "Baby, I think the baby is here." Gentlefern rushed over, and between the 2 of them, they got Joan inside and in bed. Gentlefern stayed with Joan, and Longleaf went to comfort the still panicked Acorn. Joan was lifting and delivering all sorts of wrapped mushroom paste over to her bed. She had prepared well, assuming she would have to do it all on her own. She was grateful she didn't have to and that she had Gentlefern at her side, who was helping her unwrap the paste from the leaves. She was getting water ready and laying the pillows on the floor. Longleaf, being able to finally calm Acorn down enough, brought her inside to help as well. He was peeking in the door but did not enter. In the Chikoi tribe, men were never allowed to be involved in childbirth. He went to investigate and loot the strange bodies laying in the forest. He collected the muskets and anything else that looked of value. He dragged the bodies away deep to the forest one by one. Hours had gone by, and now Joan's tractions were more and more frequent. She was spreading her mushroom paste to her belly and using a different recipe to assist the dilation. Gentle Fern and Acorn tried pulling her up. Native Americans gave birth squatting or even standing. Joan resisted at first, but the other two were very insistent. She did her best, and with their help supporting her, she squatted over the soft beaver fur pillow. She felt Hannah coming, eager to see the world around her, that she was only able to hear muffled through the amniotic sac. Longleaf with his bow watched on guard for any further threats, while Joan wailed and grunted inside, delivering Hannah. It was almost dusk, and after a full day of labor, the newborn cries were heard. They moved Joan to her bed and wiped off Hannah and passed her to Joan. All four cried together and felt relief. The birth went so well. Joan and Hannah slept all night, but Longleaf did not. He stayed awake on watch all night for any further threats that might come. In the early hours of the morning, Hannah was hungry, and to the delight of the three women, she latched to Joan and ate well. When Hannah was done and Joan was decent again, Longleaf entered. He showed Joan what he found on the four men, the muskets and the needed powders and balls for them. But one item in particular grabbed her attention, a sketched map. It showed the area around them, and it's where they were supposed to search. Circles drawn in other parts of the forest where the other search parties would be. Joan realized that when those four won't be coming back, others will know exactly where to come and look for them. It turns out Longleaf, Gentle Fern, and Acorn left one war, only to be in another. In Part 5, we will see how Joan prepares to defend herself and find out if Longleaf, Acorn, and Gentle Fern, who left their tribe to avoid conflict, are willing to fight in this war, to fight for Joan, to fight for Chana.